All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Ostrowski, and I work with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy in the Environmental Support Division. And I welcome you to our webinar this evening. We're all broadcasting from our homes, as you can see. Again, my name is Jim Ostrowski. I work with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, and I'll be the moderator for tonight's session. We've got a good session for you, a lot of different people on that are going to be talking to you from around the state. Again, that's me. We got about over 300 people registered for tonight. While people are joining us, I just want to go over a few housekeeping guidelines. First of all lines are muted, which means that you can hear us, but we can't hear you. If you have got a question, though, feel free to type it into the GoToWebinar toolbar that you have in front of you. And it's a little question box on your toolbar. Type your question in, and we'll be going through those at the end of our session today. We're recording the webinar, and we'll post it online. And there's a couple of handouts I'll probably drop in there. Recording the slide presentations for today. I'll drop those in the handouts tab at some point this evening. Just haven't had a chance to do that yet. With that, let's see. I got a couple more things just checking out here. Yep, it looks like we've got pretty much everybody on, so that's good. For some reason, I can't move my slides. So my slides are stuck for some reason. I'm locked up here. So in terms of tonight, we got several different presenters while I'm waiting for my slides to unlock. I don't know why that's happening, so I'll just wait for that. I'm going to have Teresa Seidel. Teresa, are you there? Do you want to do a quick welcome remarks?
Sure, I can do that.
All right.
Thank you everyone for attending tonight. I know it's summer and we'd all rather be doing something other than sitting in a webinar at 6 o'clock at night on whatever day of the week we're on now, I think Wednesday, but we're glad you're here and joining us. And we're pleased to bring so many partners with us today into one venue to discuss the recovery efforts that from the devastating floods that happened back on May 19th that have impacted so many of you in mid-Michigan. My name is Teresa Seidel. I'm the Water Resources Division Director for EGLE. And you're going to hear from a couple of my staff tonight, but of many other federal and local agencies to try and get your questions answered. Our intent is to stay focused on the recovery efforts tonight, though. We won't be discussing the causes behind the dam failure or get into details about long-term plans for Four Lakes. Those questions are important, but they will be answered in time, but just not tonight. We want to focus on getting out accurate information about the more immediate recovery efforts for you all that are struggling with this current situation. So we will not focus on the cause of the dam failures tonight, but really just try to focus on getting your questions answered. I also want to quickly mention that we'll be doing a webinar next Wednesday where we'll be going through some of the same focuses that you're going to hear tonight, but really talking about different permitting and regulatory questions that residents might have. There are permitting requirements, and we want to make sure that we're getting all the information we can out into your hands as quickly as possible so that you can start making some decisions on your property. We also have our EGLE webpage, which you can visit for more information regarding the recovery. When you click on www.michigan.gov/EGLE, it takes you right to the dam failures. It's the first thing on the page. So it's that high of a priority for us, and we want to make sure that you can get information. So it's a great place to get a lot of good information. It's a wonderful resource for you. So make sure you look at that page and check out the dedicated web page on this topic so that you can get any information you need. So again, that next webinar will be next Wednesday, same time, same place, and we'll be coming back and having a conversation about the permitting efforts that we can assist you with. But tonight, we have a lot of different agencies here to talk to you and give you some information about their roles and responsibilities as it relates to the floods. And we just welcome you for being here tonight. So thank you, and hope you enjoy this. Make sure you get your questions answered. Jim will walk through how that happens and what you need to do there. But thank you for joining us this evening.
Great, thanks, Teresa. And I apologize to everyone about my slides locking up. That doesn't usually happen. So tonight's agenda, like Teresa said, we're going to cover a lot of stuff from people all around the state here. Got a lot of staff here from different agencies. So we've got Gladwin County Emergency Manager Robert North will be talking to us next. From Michigan State Police, Sarah McRae is here. From FEMA, we've got James Sink and Dan Schulman. And from Eagle, I'm sorry, my screens keep on flickering. From Eagle, we've got Brian Rudolph, and from Michigan Department of Transportation, Bob Rank. And we've got some other panelists I'll introduce later on who are going to help us answer questions at the end. Just to remind you that if you do have a question, feel free to type it into the question box on your GoToWebinar toolbar, and we'll get to those at the end. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Robert North. Robert, you there?
Yes, I'm here. How are you?
Good. So I'm going to change the presentation rights over to you, and you should be able to show your screen there, sir.
There we go.
All right.
Okay, well, in Gladwin County, we of course had all the water that eventually wound up unfortunately, in our neighbors in Midland. Initially, during the downpour and the flooding, we had over 70 roads affected by water, resulted in repairs of over 50. We lost initially 3 of the 4 bridges which we needed to get across to the east side of the county. One came back basically on its own. One other was repaired, and we've got another one where the repair is in progress to go to the east side of the county. That's Secord Dam Road's open, M61 never closed. Highwood Bridge was repaired, and there is ongoing repair at the SD Road Bridge in Albright Shores. We had multiple debris removal sites for people to take the muck outs from their homes. Those sites are all now closed. They were in action for about a month or so. We had a big help on that from the County of Midland. I can't thank our neighbors to the south enough for a lot of things. At any rate, now any additional debris removal is the responsibility of the property owner and their local township and local trash management company. Our impact statement and damage assessments, of course, reports were sent up. We had great assistance from the state police coming in to help our local staff, as well as some volunteers everybody worked really hard to get that done. State police also provided ground and aerial assets. So that was a great help to us. We are down to 1 flood relief distribution center, which is at Sacred Heart Church in the city of Gladwin, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9 to 4, Saturday, 9 to noon. For water, food, cleaning items, personal care things, we've got that going on there. We're trying to also pick up some volunteers to assist with that effort. We got some people getting pretty tired. They've been at it for a long time. As a result of one of the other things they had to get done, and the state was a great help on this, we had to get a total of 4 2,500 gallon water units, 2 at Billings Fire, 2 up at Secord. Our fire departments have lost the ability to draft. Unless you're in the city of Gladwin proper or the city of Beaverton, there are no hydrants. So we had to get some additional water capability there. We're doing, so that's available now, as well as the tanker shuttle that they may have to do in the event of a fire. The other big problem that we're working on is the wells. We are, as of today, since the start of this and the drawdown of the river, which is going down really close to the original river parameters, we are right now, as of today, at 315 wells, which are affected to some extent, either low pressure, they've gone dry, there's a taste change, a color change. Any well that was topped by the water needs to be chlorinated and tested for bacteria. We have some wells that are having a hard time getting clean again. At any rate, we are working very hard to determine, we're getting a list of all the homesteads, people who live here, and we have to separate that out from the seasonals. So we're working on that so we can get a hard number. Long-term recovery group is forming with Mid-Michigan Community Action and UMCOR, and also some local faith-based groups. That's coming together. We're also researching, and we have got some leads on some funding sources to help people with well issues. And we are the long-term recovery group, and I'll be working with them determining eligibility criteria for that. So that's going on. We had some push from people, when are we going to start the rebuild? And we said, well, we got to get water first. We can't very well mix drywall mud, or people can't mix drywall mud if we don't have any water. So that's going on, and that's pretty much where we're at right now. A lot of things happening, a lot of people doing some good work. And every time we think we're starting to get a corner turned, the problem is the well issues are on both rivers. They're going up to Tobacco from the site of the breach, and they're going all the way up to Tittabawassee, where are well north of M61. We have two that have popped up now on the north side of Secord Lake up in the north end of the county since the water's been drawn down. Our numbers on June the 1st, we had 115 wells with issues, and here it is the 8th of July, and we are at 315. And we don't see that leveling off. We've been getting an increase of 2 to 5 every day of various issues. So that's where we're at. We're trying to get ahead of it. We've got some funding resources that are being looked at, and we're trying to get that put together so we give people some drinking water. So that's where we're at.
Okay, thanks, Mr. North. Now we're going to go to Sarah McRae with Michigan State Police. Sarah, you there?
I am here.
Okay, I'm going to send it over to you. Just one moment, please. Okay, you can share your screen.
You see that?
Okay, we see you.
Good. Okay. Good evening. I wanted to preface this evening with letting folks know that there has been a letter that was requesting a presidential disaster declaration for the counties of Aranac, Iosco, Gladwin, Midland, and Saginaw. Was routed to the White House on June 15th. We are currently awaiting a response to this request. It has been about a month, but there is no mandated time frame within which a decision has to be made. So even though we're all very anxious about it, we wait. It is also important to emphasize that receiving a presidential disaster declaration is not guaranteed. Therefore, I place the emphasis on if and not when there may be a presidential disaster declaration declared for these counties. I still would like to present an overview tonight of what potential assistance may be available if there is a presidential disaster declaration, but I don't intend to go too far into specifics. The time to do that is when we do have a decision made, but I also realize that folks are quite anxious to have an idea of what may be available if a declaration does occur. As a point of clarification, there are two types of federal assistance. There's individual assistance, often called IA or referred to as IA, and public assistance, referred to as PA. And the letter that was sent up to the White House requested both IA and PA for each of the 5 counties. Individual assistance, more specifically, the Individuals in Households Assistance Program, or IHP is often referred to, is what most homeowners will think of when referring to federal disaster assistance. Under IA, FEMA provides financial assistance and direct services to eligible individuals and households who have uninsured or underinsured necessary expenses and serious needs, as well as to state and local governments to support individuals in their communities. The amount of assistance is limited. It's capped. It is not a substitute for insurance. It cannot and does not compensate individuals for all losses that were incurred by a disaster. And it is primarily intended to meet an individual's basic needs and supplement disaster recovery efforts. It is not designed to make someone whole. So those are important things to keep in mind. Speaking of IHP, there are 2 kinds or 2 categories. There's housing assistance and what is known as other needs assistance that may be referred to as ONA. In addition, if we were to receive a federal IA declaration, the U.S. Small Business Administration, or SBA, will make low interest, long-term loans available to disaster survivors. As noted on the screen, there are also a few other potential programs that may be available through individual assistance, disaster case management, crisis counseling assistance program, and disaster legal services. Under PA, FEMA provides grants to state and local governments and certain private nonprofit organizations to assist them with disaster response and recovery. That would be where you would include debris removal, and restoration of damaged or destroyed facilities. Those are your infrastructure type of losses. Another thing to be aware of is if Michigan does receive a presidential disaster declaration, applying for federal assistance will look different than what some may have seen in the past. If they have been involved in previous disaster declarations, it's going to look different in this COVID environment. The majority of the interaction, the application process, answering questions, all of this will take place virtually. Again, this is something that we will communicate in depth should we receive a declaration, but everyone should rest assured if we are awarded one, the message will be spread far and wide through numerous outlets and mediums to people. So in the meantime, those who have experienced damage to their homes, loss of personal property, do what needs to be done, get the work done. If that's removing drywall, if it's mold remediation, repairing damage, it may mean hiring contractors to complete a job. It could mean neighbors helping neighbors, reaching out to volunteer organizations, and I'll cover that a little bit, how to access external resources in a bit. The important things to keep in mind, document, document, document. I cannot stress this enough. Keep all of your receipts, keep all of your records for work that has been completed. Secondary, photos. Take photos to validate the work that has been completed. Take pictures of the damage ahead of time, as well as the repairs or replacement. And if you have photos of what something looked like previously prior to the flood, those can also be useful, especially if applying for an SBA loan. It helps to validate the value of the loss of personal property in particular. Now, if you have unmet needs and you reside in the counties of Aranac, Gladwin, Midland, or Saginaw, call 211. If you're in Iosco County, you'll want to reach out to your emergency manager. And when you do so, there's just a few things bullet points here to keep in mind. Provide your contact information, the resident's name, address, a convenient phone number to return a call. Specify the unmet need or needs. Be very direct, concise. What is it that you need? What is it that the provider would need to know? When you call 211, you will be talking with an operator who will then direct it to a voluntary organization. So what do they need to know? Also include with that the urgency. Is this something that needs to be done immediately? Or where do you need to fall in the queue? Next thing is long-term recovery. And as Bob mentioned a little bit in his presentation, long-term recovery committees have formed. They're meeting regularly right now in Gladwin, Midland, and Saginaw counties. Efforts are also underway in Aranac, and Iosco counties are looking also to form a similar type of working group. So in summary, we're awaiting the decision. The letter's been sent up requesting a presidential disaster declaration. We continue to view this as if and not when. And if there is a presidential disaster declaration granted, it will be communicated to residents in the 5 counties. People will be informed of next steps to take to apply for assistance. In the meantime, conduct the recovery work that needs to be done. Document everything, take pictures, keep all receipts. And if you have unmet needs, call 211. If you are in Aranac, Gladwin, Midland, and Saginaw counties, and the emergency manager if you happen to be in Iosco County. And for contact information at the end, it's myself, State Individual Assistance Officer, Public Assistance, and also Matt Sheffer, Recovery Unit Manager. Any of us can also help answer some of your questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Now we're going to go over to James Sink and Dan Schulman over at FEMA. And guys, I'm going to share, James, I'm going to share or allow you to present. So hold on just a moment here. There you go.
Okay, does that look all right for everyone?
Yes, we can see it. Thanks.
Okay, let me go back to the beginning here. I started on the wrong slide. Dan, if you would like to introduce yourself, we can go ahead and get started.
Yeah, thanks to our James Sink and Jim Ostrowski. Thank you very much for including FEMA on the presentation tonight. Greetings to our partners at the Michigan State Police and Department of Eagle, who we work closely with on a variety of issues, not just when disasters happen. We're happy to be here, happy to answer questions. Sarah covered a lot of the information that I think needs to come out. First and foremost is that the governor's request is still under review. There is no set timeline for that, and as soon as a determination is made, we'll be working very closely with the state to communicate that information out to residents and our operational partners. In the meantime, we are here to answer questions that people might have about disasters generally. But as we've talked about in a lot of other fora, insurance really is the best source of recovery for most people. Unfortunately, James Fink, who is our regional flood insurance liaison at our Region 5 office in Chicago, is here and is going to go over the National Flood Insurance Program and address a number of the issues that we've already been hearing from people in the affected counties in Michigan. So with that, I'll turn it over to James, and I'll be here for questions at the end.
Okay, so we got a summary of where the current disaster declaration request is, so I can go ahead and move past those slides. As Dan said, my name is James Sink. I am the FEMA Region 5 Flood Insurance Liaison. So anytime there are questions about the National Flood Insurance Program or people need outreach and education, I'm generally the person that they work with in order to help with those things. So, what do you need to know about flood insurance, both following the recent flooding and also potential future flooding? The first thing that you need to know is the definition of a flood. And this is really important, especially for the recent flooding that happened. Excuse me, flooding is defined in the standard flood insurance policy. It's got a very technical definition, but which is there on your screen right now. It's a general and temporary condition of partial or complete inundation of 2 or more acres of normally dry land or 2 or more properties, one of which is your own. And it continues. But what is important for the average person is that anytime water flows over land that is usually dry and it affects at least one building it affects 2 properties, that is a flood. So that means that you should file a flood insurance claim. So for this particular flood event, it is really important for everyone to understand if they had flood insurance, they should file a claim. The cause of the flooding does not matter. What does matter is that water flowed over normally dry land and your property got wet. So if that happened, please call your insurance company, your agent, or the claims department in order to start the claims process. There is some time limitations on filing those claims, and in most cases it's 60 days. So it's really important that if you have not yet filed your flood insurance claim, that you do so now. If you don't know who to call, you can always call the National Flood Insurance Program at 877-336-2627, and they will help you find your agent or insurance company. So how does the claims process work? The first thing that you have to do, just like any other insurance claim, is you notify your insurance company. As soon as it's safe to do so, go ahead, give them a call, ask for advance payment. In certain cases, we can pay you a portion of your claim to start you on the road to recovery before your claim has been closed. After that happens, you're going to prepare for inspection. Your insurance company will assign an adjuster to you within 48 hours, and you'll get contacted within the first couple days there to schedule an inspection. As was said earlier, make sure you're taking photos and video of damaged items before throwing them out. If you have curtains or if you have carpeting, any of that kind of stuff, try to keep a little swatch of it for the adjuster so they can kind of determine the value of those items. Your adjuster is going to show up, be sure that you're working with them. Again, ask about advance payment to see if your situation is one where we can pay you a portion of your claim before the claim is closed. And you'll also want to talk about increased cost of compliance, which we'll come back to here momentarily. The next item you see here is document your loss and receive payment. This is a part that's very scary for people. It's something called a proof of loss. And what that actually is it's a document saying, hey, insurance company, this was my damage. Can you please pay me whatever that dollar amount is? And you have to sign it. It's very intimidating for policyholders because they think that that's the end of the process. That's not the case. It's simply a request for payment that you have to sign and send in. After you get paid, if you find that there's more damage or something else comes up, you can always get another proof of loss. So it's really important that that document gets signed as soon as possible, and you can always do a second one later if something else comes up. Next, if your insurance company for some reason denies your flood insurance claim through the National Flood Insurance Program, you can always appeal, and that appeal is handled by FEMA itself, not the insurance company. So some recovery tips, after you've notified your insurance company and it is safe to enter your home, there's no longer an evacuation order, the water has receded, hopefully there's no electrical concerns, anything like that. When it's safe, like we talked about, you're going to take photos and videos of the damage, try to capture any of the structural and personal property damages that occurred. Make sure that you get the serial numbers for your large appliances so that they can determine the value. If possible, give your adjuster receipts for any damaged property or any work that you've done. Like we talked about, keep samples of your carpeting so that we can figure out the type and quality of material so that we can pay you properly. And then also make sure that you're talking to your insurance adjuster and insurance company before you actually sign for any permanent work on like the electrical system or water or HVAC systems, just to make sure that all of that's squared away and it's something that we can reimburse you for. It's better to talk to them on the front end than try to figure it out after the work has already been done. Always making sure that as soon as you've documented your loss through those photographs, you're throwing away any of those items that could pose a health risk or grow mold. The National Flood Insurance Program does not cover preventable mold damage. So what that means is, let's say that the house flooded and you went away for 3 weeks and you just didn't come back and the house was filled with mold. Well, that was preventable, so we're not going to pay for that. On the other hand, if you were evacuated and you couldn't return home, or if you had a medical condition and you couldn't do the work, like we'll take that into consideration. But if the damage from mold was preventable, it is ineligible under the standard flood insurance policy. For more tips on cleaning up from mold, you'll want to visit the Environmental Protection Agency, and I provided that link below. So the other thing that we need to think about when we're working on recovery from a flood is enforcing local floodplain management standards and making sure that we're permitting. Before you start working on construction and repairs from flood damaged property, Michigan residents really should be working with their local floodplain management and building officials to make sure that any necessary permits are completed. And we're going to talk about this here, why this is important here shortly. It's especially important for people who live inside of a high-risk floodplain or flood zone that's called a special flood hazard area. Other people call it a 100-year floodplain. Basically, it's the area where if you live, your mortgage company is going to make you have flood insurance. If the structure is substantially damaged, usually that means damage to more than 50% of its value prior to the flood event, it's going to have to be built back in compliance with the current local floodplain management ordinances. Now that's really good because it makes the community more resilient in the future and reduces future flood damages. When this happens, it can also unlock something called increased cost of compliance. Increased cost of compliance is a part of most flood insurance policies through the National Flood Insurance Program, and it can offer up to an additional $30,000 to help build your home back in a way that's more resistant to future flood damage. Specifically, it will cover the cost up to $30,000 to repair, replace, floodproof, or elevate structures that are eligible. But again, it's really important that local officials are enforcing those local ordinances and that you are making sure that any permitting is completed before you start that work. And there's a link there to FEMA's website with more information on building permits and making sure that all of those are taken care of prior to starting repair work. So let's talk a little bit about myths about flood insurance, because I've heard of some. The first one is that you can't file a flood insurance claim because this was a man-made event. And that is absolutely not true. Like we talked about earlier, what matters is that water flowed across land that's normally dry and your property got wet. There was a flood. The reason it flooded doesn't matter. File your flood insurance claim if you have flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program. The second myth that I've heard is that you have to wait to file your flood insurance claim until litigation is complete. That's not true. There are strict timelines to completing your flood insurance claim, and they're really, really difficult to get around. So waiting until litigation is complete means that you've missed those deadlines. If you have flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program, please file your claim as soon as you can. A couple more are secondary or vacation homes are not eligible for flood insurance. That's not true. Secondary and vacation homes definitely can have flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program. The National Flood Insurance Program is a voluntary program. That means that your community has volunteered to enforce those floodplain management regulations we talked about a little bit ago. And when they agree to do that, we agree to make federally backed flood insurance available in that community. And as long as that community has volunteered to participate, flood insurance is available for a primary home, secondary or vacation homes, businesses, apartments. You know, if you rent, you can definitely have flood insurance. Next, I have to live in a floodplain or flood zone to buy flood insurance. And again, that's not true. What matters is that you're in a community that has volunteered to participate in the program. You do not need to be in a high-risk flood zone or a floodplain. Flood insurance premiums are determined by risk. So if you're in one of those lower risk zones, flood insurance can be really affordable. It could be as little as $100 a year for a renter's policy. It could, and starting at about $500 a year for a house in a low risk zone. You can't buy flood insurance if your property has flooded before. Again, what matters here is that your community participates. In general, we don't look at your loss history when determining your eligibility to buy flood insurance. As long as you're in that participating community, you can buy flood insurance. So again, this is a reason that you should also file your claim. Do not be afraid to file a claim, because when it comes to flood insurance through the NFIP, we're not really interested in that loss history. So we're not going to hold that against you in most cases. There's a certain property of a building or a certain class of buildings called severe repetitive loss, but that's a very small percentage, and I don't think anyone here falls into that category. The next one, I don't need flood insurance if I can get disaster assistance from FEMA. Like was talked about earlier, we're still waiting on a decision on the federal disaster declaration. But because flood insurance is not dependent on that disaster declaration, we can pay out as soon as claims are filed. Across the state of Michigan, for flooding that happened during the month of May, we have paid out almost $18 million in flood insurance claims. So it's really important to have flood insurance, because we're able to get you that money in your hand quicker, and you're able to start recovering faster than you would be. People who have flood insurance in general are more holistic in their recoveries. So I really encourage you, if you don't have flood insurance, to talk to your agent today about purchasing flood insurance to protect against future flood losses. So we talked about this about ICC. That's up to $30,000 to take some mitigation action if your house was substantially damaged. And again, it's really dependent on the community enforcing their floodplain management ordinance and on making sure building permits are issued. If you had a flood insurance policy, if you were substantially damaged, if you're damaged to 50% or more of your pre-flood value, you can probably get that increased cost of compliance claim, but you'll need to talk to your adjuster and your insurance company about your specific circumstance to make sure that you'll be eligible for that. Some helpful resources, floodsmart.gov. If you need help filing a claim, you'll want to visit floodsmart.gov/start. There's a link there for appeals, more information about increased cost of compliance. And then there's a website there for federal disaster assistance, and when a decision's made about the disaster declaration, you'll be able to find additional information there. But that concludes what I have for the NFIP.
All right, great. Thanks, James and Dan, for your presentation. Sure, we'll be hearing from more of you when we do the Q&A. Next, we're going to go over to Brian Rudolph with Eagle. So, Brian, you there?
I am here.
All right, and just send it over to share your screen. I see it.
Okay, very good. As Jim said, my name is Brian Rudolph. I'm the district supervisor for the Bay City District Office in the Water Resources Division. And I want to take a few minutes tonight, primarily to give sort of a 30,000-foot view of permitting requirements as it relates to flood recovery. Next week, as Teresa said at the opening, we'll have a much more in-depth presentation. So if you have questions, if you have scenarios you'd like to have addressed, that'll be a good opportunity to bring those, and we will cover that in much greater detail. Sorry, I somehow muted myself. So when do I need a permit from Eagle? Generally speaking, if you're doing work within regulated areas such as floodplains, streams, lakes, bottomlands of lakes or wetlands, you'll need a permit from Eagle in the Water Resource Division. Examples of that work include things such as replacing existing structures or repairing damaged structures, such as homes or garages or seawalls, other shoreline protection that fall into these regulated areas. These are going to typically require a permit. Specific to the 100-year floodplain, permits are going to be required if you're building a new structure, again, a home, a garage, or a commercial building. If you are making an addition that expands the existing footprint, and that includes things like a new or replacement deck, stairs, porches, patios, any filling or grading within the floodplain will require a permit, and other things such as failed bridges, culverts, some shoreline protection if you're along a river in the floodplain, and filling or grading in low areas such as bottomlands or wetlands. Not everything requires a permit for working within the 100-year floodplain. Here are some examples of activities that may not, depending upon the particulars of your project, but generally elevating an existing residence without filling, grading, or increasing that footprint won't require a permit. Repairs to the interior of the structure, including elevating it, new or replacement septic systems if they're put in below grade, replacing utilities if you don't change the grade, and landscaping such as tree and vegetation planting when you don't have to raise the grade or have additional fill. For those of you along the lakes of Wixom and Sanford Lake, these sort of activities will generally require a permit from Eagle. Dredging, filling, grading on the bottomlands, the areas that are in front of your seawall, are all going to require a permit. Replacement of a seawall or installing a new one. Installing new rock riprap will all require a permit. Placing any new structures on the bottomland requires a permit. Also, removing logs, removing stumps from the bottomland, or any dredging, filling, draining of wetlands associated with the lake or the bottomland or the rivers would require a permit. Again, there are activities that don't typically need a permit from Eagle. Activities such as filling behind your seawall or installing new tiebacks to support it on the landward side typically won't require a permit. There's an exemption specific to repairing your seawall where the repairs are less than 25% of the existing seawall, and as long as you use the same material in the existing design. Additionally, if you had rock riprap along your seawall or you just had a rock riprap shoreline and that was displaced by erosion or flooding, you can reset that and reinstall that without a permit. So that was just a real brief overview. This is our contact information in my office. If you have general questions on permitting, feel free to call me. If you have floodplain specific questions, I would suggest you call Joy Brooks. She's a floodplain engineer in my office. And you should always take time to call your county soil erosion office to check on soil erosion permits. Check with your local building official for any local building permit requirements, as you heard Mr. Zink say. And if you would like to sign up for email updates or get additional information, here's some opportunities on social media. That's really all I have for now. Jim, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you.
All right, thanks, Brian. And now we're going to go to our last presentation of the night. It's Robert Rank from Michigan Department of Transportation. And Robert, are you there? Looks like you are.
Yes,
Good.
sir. I'm here.
There you go. Okay.
Can you see the presentation?
Yep, we see it. Go ahead.
All right. My name is Bob Rankin with the Michigan Department of Transportation. I am the Bay Region engineer. I cover 15 counties, and first I'd like to acknowledge all the hard work that all our first responders did, engineers, technicians. We worked around the clock to try to get the roads open, and we really appreciate everybody's hard work, including the county and city folks. So what are we working on and what are we going to do in the future? That's what we're going to talk about. Well, we have at one time when we first had the event, we were closing bridges and roadways, and then we were working to inspect them and open them up. At the same time, we were closing bridges downstream, down in Saginaw counties and other places. At one time, we had 23 state roads and bridges closed, and we still have quite a few closed right now. And really, that we want to give you a little perspective on what we're working on and what we're going to be doing along here. It's in Midland, Gladwin, Iosco, Aranac, and Saginaw counties. So this gives a perspective of how many locations per county we had under emergency in the transportation system. This is Aranac County. Since this map, we actually closed another bridge downtown Au Gres last night due to additional scouring that happened. So we're still working on these. We have parts of M65 closed also. So this has been difficult as we're continuing to work on our system. This is Iosco County. This is Midland County, all the different locations. And Saginaw County. And then Gladwin County. So this kind of gives you an understanding of what we have to do, and we have to log those in and get those each location done and get federal funding for each location. First thing, we wanted to talk about the US 10 bridges. They were undermined and washed out. We were able to, within 3 days, put an emergency contract together to rebuild the approaches and the all the riprap and the backfill needed underneath. If you can see the picture on the right, you can see all of the pile structure that's been exposed, and that's not supposed to be exposed, and it's all been washed away. According to USGS gauges, the Tittawassee area was a 200 to 500 year flood. That means should be one occurrence in that how many years. The Tobacco River had a 500 to 100 year flood. So this is a way that we gauge this and to be able to understand what we need to do to protect our infrastructure. As you can see here, we backfilled behind US 10. We were able to get that going right away. The picture on the right I wanted to show you was 3 of our engineers working with the federal government, the Federal Highway Administration, to get approval. Any location over $5,000, we have to get approval to use federal funding for. So there's, I know Sarah talked about document. We have to do the same things, and we have to make sure that all those necessary approvals are in place before it happens on a temporary measure, and then also on a permanent measure. So this has been something that's really can be challenging at times as far as the timing goes. So the initial steps, as of today, we had the US 10 bridge contract. We got that started and we actually fully opened that. In June, we have some consultant contracts to get all the necessary paperwork put together for federal highway approval. We also have a consultant contract put together for the emergency design of all the bridges and locations, and that includes the locals too. And we did start in June, we started a debris removal contract. You can see the picture on the right. It's pretty devastating. One of the reasons why we wanted to put a debris removal contract in place is not only just to remove it for the future, but it was to get in there and inspect those piers. We do not know if the piers are undermined and washed away underneath there, so we can make sure to check and design to do some replacement work. The debris removal contract to do this work and at the Causeway Bridge is about $1.2 million. So to talk specifically about the M30 bridge over the Tittawassee, the debris right now was holding up all of the water flow, and it was overtopping the bridge. That's what happened during the flood event. We had about a 20-acre area between there and the dam that many of the trees were washed, not only there, but underneath. We had one of our inspectors out there, Tommy Rank, said that they removed 3-foot diameter logs underneath all that as they're removing it right now. So this is a big, a slow operation that we're working on. So the abutment that you see here on the left picture, those steel piles that are being shown underneath, that is, we've been working to realign all that channel and working to not have the water stray away and make sure it was put back to where it originally was. A lot of the guardrail, as you can see, is all gone. And then on the picture on the right is the approaches that have been washed away. Our goal is to get that repaired along with anything that needs to get done in the piers. So these pictures were taken last week. The picture on the left shows the haul road that we have the contractor put together. The close-up on the right is a barge where the excavator is on there. It is able to float out there and grab the debris and put it on another barge, and then that is tugged over with another boat over to the edge and then loaded into a truck and then hauled out. So the contractor is working under a very expedited schedule. This work is supposed to get done by the end of July, and as you can see, the amount of work and the amount of debris there, it is a daunting task. So what are we going to do? MDOT's plan for there, you can see there's a schematic there. I'm not asking you to look at it in detail, but basically what we're going to do is our MDOT bridge designers are working in Lansing right now, designing the south abutment to be retrofitted and pressure grouted and put new piles in, so we can have it to where we can get the existing structure open. If the piers are in good shape, we can get that open. Our goal is to put it together so we can get about a 3 or 5 year fix on that bridge to be able to have it open for the motoring public. And then once we get everything done as far as the future goes, we will then look at a reconstruction in the future. Switching over to the M30 over Tobacco River. You've seen pictures of some of the causeway. We had a 60-foot long bridge in there that had washed away, and there's about a 120-foot opening there now. As you can see the picture on the right, that bridge is basically, and the debris is down in the bottom of the causeway, and the contractor is challenged with removing all those pieces and parts of the old bridge and working around the utilities and all those things just to get the debris removed and get all the necessary preliminary work till we can get a design going for a temporary bridge, which I want to show you here next. So in the causeway, we're looking at designing a temporary structure. We do not know what the overall plan is going to be, but we want to open this up in months, not years. So we're going to make the bridge longer, over 100 feet compared to the 60 feet it had, and higher, somewhere between 3 and 4 feet higher. So we can essentially get the road open and get out of the way of anything that's going to happen hydraulically there. This bridge solution is something that's happened in other places around the world. There are 3 manufacturers of temporary bridges in the United States, and we're looking to have those manufacturers come in, and we will build the approach and the abutments and work on the causeway and those kind of things. Then they will come in and assemble a bridge that we can either buy or we can rent for about 3 to 5 years. The next thing I wanted to talk about was an issue that's happening throughout the whole area. It's called head cutting. It's really basically when if you see the middle picture there, that person standing in the blue hat is standing on the bottom of the lake bottom, and the surface level of the river is below the lake bottom. That is put basically in place, and it's going to be in place like that because the existing river is eroding the bottom of the lake bed. The picture on the left, when you see section 20 there and section 80, those are 4 feet apart from the dam elevation to the bridges. So we are not out of the woods as far as US 10 goes. We have to build a weir that will help stop the head cutting, at least to protect our bridge. And this could be affected by 4 or 5 more bridges as you go up all the way to the north and all the different rivers and crossings. Just to let you know, this is a schematic, but the red line is where the weir is. In other words, we're going to put a steel structure and stone structure back to where the old bed was, where the old bottom of the lake is, so we can have the water level go back up to normal levels, because we don't want to have the water eroding further down at a lower elevation and then erode underneath where we just fixed. The right schematic shows how water will flow over and eventually will continue to erode out to protect our structures. So the final timelines here, the end of July, we will finish the debris removals. We also finish the design for the Tittawassee Bridge retrofit. Once we get those footings inspected and designed, so then we can be ready for an August start to repair that M30 Tittawassee Bridge. We're also going to be removing the material from the causeway and designing the approaches for the temporary bridge in August over the Tobacco River and the causeway. So that's going to occur next month also. We then are working on this weir system for designing for US 10, which is the most urgent, and we're going to be looking at other crossings also. So at the end of September, under the emergency contract process or earlier, we hope that we would have the M30 Tittawassee Bridge open and help with relief for the folks in between the dam and the bridge to the south. And then in November or earlier, we would have the temporary bridge in the causeway. It's our efforts that we're putting together. We have every effort we can, including the federal partners, the counties, everybody helping put this together. And this process we're putting together is also happening in the county level. The County Road Commission, for Gladwin, and also all of them will be listed there in Midland. Those large bridges are going to be worked through this also. So we have all the tools in place to get these things going as soon as possible. There are a lot of barriers that we have, including utilities and debris and those kind of things, but our folks are working tirelessly. Lastly, I wanted to talk about the Aranet County bridges closed, just to give you a little bit of understanding and education. We have closed 2 bridges up in Twining. This is the same event, but afterward. If you see that orange and white line rod, those are a foot each, and that is on one part of the bridge. And then the one bridge on the picture on the bottom shows the that line rod right in the middle of the bridge, undermined and eroded to the point where we could not handle any more traffic. So we have detours set up, we have underwater inspections, we have unmanned sonar vehicles, boats that can go out and take sonar. But these are the reasons why that we have to close bridges and then go through emergency repair process. I wanted to talk about a couple things. First is visitors. We know that this is an interesting thing. We have our contractors out there working, and we have work zones that we would really appreciate to tell your friends and family and other folks that to try not to go all the way out to the edge of the bridge and look over. Try not to drive your vehicles all the way down to where we're loading up debris. Try to give us the room and respect to the contractors, because those are some very important safety-wise for that. And to help us with that would really help it. We're going to try to get the roads open as soon as we possibly can. So we have been saying that we wanted to get these bridges and roads open. They're yours in weeks and days and months, not years. And we have been putting together methodically a systematic approach to get things done one thing at a time with the amount of restrictions that we have, and making sure we're doing it safely so we can have the roadways open and not have this sit there for years and have people trapped. So we wanted to have no gaps in the amount of work that's happening. If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of MDOT. A lot of people have. That's all I have for my portion.
All right, thanks, Bob. And that brings us to the end of our presentations tonight. What I'm going to do now is bring it back to me here. Okay, and I'm just going to bring up my slides here if I can. So bear with me just one moment. All right, so now it's time for questions. So we did have quite a few questions that came in tonight, and a lot of them have been answered by some of our panelists. So that's good to see. But I'm going to basically read these off, and I want to introduce also Jared Sanders. He's with Water Resources Division. He's been helping me look through the questions as well. So Jared, if you see one that I don't ask that you want to, just break in and let me know. But I'm just going to get started. So everybody ready? Let's see. The first question I had on my board here says, I have been contacted by a number of lawyer officers who are talking about class actions and our other claims against city, dam owners, etc. Any recommendations on that? Thanks. So I don't know if any of you want to chime in on that question.
Jim, this is Jared. I'll just hop in on that one
Sure.
very quickly. Apologize, I don't have a camera up, but the bottom line is that, ultimately that's not what the agencies are here to do, is make recommendations about those private lawsuits. And we know that those things are out there, but unfortunately, we're not going to be able to make a recommendation on it here tonight.
All right, thanks, Jared. And I also want to introduce a couple other panelists that are joining us who did not present. We also have Dave Rothman from Four Lakes Task Force, who is serving as a panelist tonight, and also Jennifer Boyer, who is Midlands County, who's the Midland County Emergency Management Coordinator. So Jennifer's on as well if we have any questions that need to be directed to either of them. And in terms of our video cameras, just to let you guys know, I think only four of them will show on the screen at once. Let's see here. So here's kind of a longer one. It says, I was hoping someone from Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, or Health and Human Services could speak to the steps they took in order to determine that these agencies are not recommending any additional soil cleanup or management requirements beyond those already in place at the site after reviewing soil and sediment samples collected in sample data, and sample collected in follow-up to the recent Midland and Saginaw area flood event. I guess some of this is quoted in the Detroit News, this person says. So I don't know who wants to address that question.
Yeah, so Jim, this is Jared again. I'm not supposed to be a panelist, but I will take that one. Ultimately, we don't have our soil toxicologists on the call today. If folks want more information about the sampling that has taken place and the specific recommendations that have been made, the website that Teresa mentioned earlier, if you go to michigan.gov/Eagle, right near the top of the page is a link to the Edenville dam failure. And then if you follow down into the press releases there's some more specific information about samples that have been taken and that sampling and review is an ongoing thing, but there's certainly more information there if folks want to visit that.
All right, thanks. And I'll try to get some questions for our panelists. All right. And I think this one goes to Sarah. How can you get notified if the declaration is signed? Going back to your discussion about the emergency declaration.
There will be plenty of opportunities, really. There will be lots of press releases, so it will be in social media, it will be on news, it will be in newspapers. There will be all sorts of opportunities to learn about it when it happens. So no one will be left out. The local emergency managers will be promoting it through their channels. So it will be shared widely and broadly.
All right. This one I think goes to James and Dan. A number of people did not get flood, but water damage from sewage backup or other leachings from walls in the basements. How are these cases counted?
So usually the National Flood Insurance Program will require that definition of flood be met. And that requires that water needs to be flowing across normally dry land. But this is a complicated situation, and each flood claim is unique. Each flood event is unique. So I would definitely still file the claim and let the insurance company make the decision as to whether or not it meets the definition of flood. This was a complex and unique situation, and I don't want to tell someone they shouldn't file a claim when they really should. So file it and let the insurance company decide.
Okay, here's another one for you, James. What kind of flood insurance would you have to get everything covered as you are stating back when you presented? So you're familiar with limited policy, meaning $15,000 and that's it.
Yeah. So through the National Flood Insurance Program, for most residential structures, most houses, we offer up to $250,000 in building coverage and up to $100,000 in contents coverage. For businesses, those policy limits go up to $500,000 for the building and $500,000 for the contents. There's a third category for condominium associations that's a bit different. And I can work with that one if someone has a specific question on that. But those policy limits are set by statute, up to $250,000 for a home, $100,000 for the contents in there. Starts at about $500 a year if you're eligible for a preferred risk policy. There are also a variety of private flood insurance products that are not part of the National Flood Insurance Program. We don't really know a lot about them. So everyone should be talking to their insurance company and seeing what's eligible under their specific insurance product. But it's possible with a $15,000 policy limit that's possibly a private flood policy. I wouldn't see that very often on the NFIP side.
Hey, James, this is Dan. That sounds like a figure that would be common in a sewer backup rider on their homeowner's policy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
All right. I think this one might be for Brian. If not, Brian, go ahead and you can tell somebody else to answer it. If my house is substantially damaged and it is in the floodway, can I rebuild it given the state law prohibits residential in the floodway?
Sorry, Jim.
Brian? Okay.
So I'm not the expert on that. I would recommend talking to Joy Brooks in our office or tuning in next week for the webinar. I know there's a lot of particulars about if your home is substantially damaged and the requirements to rebuild after that. And residential development in a floodway is not something we issue permits for at the state level, residential occupation. So if you'd like to call our office, talk to Joy Brooks, she can give you the particulars on that. Certainly tune in next week and we can try and answer that better for you.
All right, thanks, Brian. And while you're there, I got another question for you here. If the fill and efforts to stop severe erosion is complete, any paperwork need to be filed. This presentation is 45 days too late as the seawalls and yards had to be saved.
Right. So if you've already had to undertake those actions, and we understand some folks absolutely had to, you should give me a call and we'll work with you to get through the process on permitting.
Okay. Going back to James, would I be eligible for ICC if the cost to repair my home is more than my insurance?
So there are a couple of factors that go along with determining if someone's eligible for ICC. The first and most important one is that your community is doing substantial damage determinations. They have to have issued you a letter saying that you are substantially damaged. That means in most cases, damaged to more than 50% of the pre-event value of your home. When they give you that letter, you might be eligible for ICC. Again, you would have to have flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program. In most cases, you have to be in the special flood hazard area. Other people might call that a 100-year floodplain or a high-risk flood zone. So there are a couple boxes you have to check, but in that case, given the very limited information, I would definitely encourage you to talk to your insurance company or adjuster about that to see if it's an option in your specific case. But it sounds like it might be an option.
Yeah, thank you. And I did have a couple people ask about if there's going to be recording of this presentation. And yes, there is a recording, and we'll send it out to all the people who registered as soon as we can in the next couple days. All right, this one I think is for
Jim, can I just jump in on that quickly? We will also post a recording likely on the web page that I just mentioned a little bit ago, and then I know you guys save it on your individual page. So if someone was not on this broadcast, you can certainly forward the link, but also you can just tell folks to go to the web page and they'll be able to find it there.
Yep. Okay. I think this question's for Bob at MDOT. Who is paying for all the road and bridge work you described?
So you can hear me, right?
Yep.
We have a federal fund because it's declared an emergency and it's a federal aid eligible roadway. We have a fund that we're allowed to go to the FHWA, which is the Federal Highway Administration, and they have a national fund that they can tap for emergencies. So there's a declared emergency by the governor. We're allowed to use that for 100% federal funding for that. So it doesn't come out of our normal work. That is for a more of a temporary fix. There are some other stipulations for longer term fixes, which it may come out of what we normally would do to reconstruct it. So right now, there's opportunities both on the county side, city side, and MDOT's to do 100% federal aid for these roadways to get them fixed. So that doesn't affect our normal budgets.
All right, and thanks. I got another question here for you from somebody else. What is the status of the Curtis Road Bridge in Midland County? Do you know that?
We do talk to the county a lot. We actually have those county consultant contracts. Those consultant contracts we're putting together are going to help the county. Right now, they have to have a debris removal contract. Also, they have to have a also get the utilities that are currently on the bridge have that coordination. Once they get that inspected, they want to keep that existing bridge because it'll be a lot quicker. If they have to build a newer bridge, it's going to be a longer and wider and higher, which will take a real long time. So the inspection, once they get the debris removed, will be key to help get that bridge either retrofitted somehow. It's a little bit up in the air because they have to have Consumers Power do that work. And that's only from me talking to the Midland County Road Commission. I do know that there will be a coordination with all of our work that we do in the Edenville area.
Okay. Next question, and I don't know who this one would go to, but will someone explain the buyback procedure under the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program? Somebody want to take that one?
So this is Jennifer Boyer from Midland County. I've dealt with hazard mitigation grants. It's not really an area of my subject matter expertise at all. However, I was helping with Village of Sanford. They had applied for a hazard mitigation grant back in 2018 from our 2017 declaration, in which they received about $750,000 to purchase properties to remove them from the floodplain. So there's a lot of different things with that. The key thing to know is that a jurisdiction has to apply for that grant. Residents cannot apply directly to FEMA. Those grant dollars are usually annually offered, but they're competitive nationally and between different states and that kind of stuff. And hopefully we have asked for hazard mitigation funding to be made available if we do get a presidential declaration here. But that all has to go through the local jurisdiction because there is a 75-25% match with that. So there's a 25% match that has to come from the locals, whether that's through the local jurisdiction, the village or township or city, or if that is shared by those that are receiving the grant to remove their homes from the floodplain. But there's quite a lengthy process for that. So if you are interested in, as a resident interested in that process, I would encourage you to reach out to your local jurisdiction now to let them know so that they can start maybe putting some of those things together so that when grant dollars come available, they can apply for those and know who really in the community is interested in that, because really, you know, it's up to the resident to want to participate in that program and to want to have their home purchased. So there's a lot of different variables that go along with that, depending on when the application is made. For the situation in the Village of Sanford, since the grant was done prior to the flooding event, they were able to be offered pre-flood value of their home. And those types of things also take into consideration is if you have flood insurance and you receive a payout from your claim because of the flood, that is taken off that amount in which they can offer you for the home. So you can't get the full value of home plus your insurance money too. There's a lot of different factors that come into that. So, but again, if you're interested in that program, I would encourage you as soon as possible to call your city, township, or village office to let them know, because there's a lot of work and that needs to go on in the background before the application even becomes available for local jurisdictions. If there's anything specific I can try to answer, I'm more than happy to do that, but that's in general the process and what I would encourage residents to currently do at this time.
All right, thanks, Jennifer. Go ahead, somebody else.
I was just going to say, I think that we would agree wholeheartedly with what Jennifer said, and that it's really important that you start working with your local communities so that they can have an idea of the projects they want to pursue if funding becomes available. And all of our grant programs are voluntary. So if they already have an idea of who's willing to participate in those, it's going to be helpful. But just, I definitely echo everything Jennifer said.
All right,
I
thanks.
guess I would add real quickly to that, sorry, that it is a long-term process. It's the grant process is, you could look at maybe 3 to 5 years for the process between starting the information, applying for it, getting the approval through FEMA for the jurisdiction, and then actually the state rolling out that process to the jurisdiction so they can start moving forward on that. So it's what, 2020, and it was just spring of this year that the state of Michigan sat down with the village of Sanford to roll out that grant that they applied for out of the 2018 funding. So it's been a good 2-year process or so for that. So just keep in mind that this is not something that will happen by the end of this year, or it's multiple year process for that. So again, really think it through, weigh your options, know that you have time to make some decisions, but at some point decisions have to be made, and a committal needs to be made for that, but it does take some time.
I just wanted to jump in with one last thing about the cost share you had mentioned, the 75-25 cost share. If people have flood insurance and they have increased cost of compliance, that $30,000 can be applied to the local cost share. So it's really helpful to the communities there to meet their obligation post-disaster. So something to keep in mind if you're from one of the communities where people were experienced with had experienced flooding and they have an increased cost of compliance claim, there's a process to go through where that can be assigned to the community for them to use for the cost share. So just keep that in the back of your mind as you're thinking about the long-term recovery process.
All right, let's see here. So getting to some other questions. Can somebody give us an update on the second dam? Anybody want to tackle that one?
It's a Secord dam.
Oh, Secord Dam, yes, sorry, I misread it. Anybody want to?
Bob North from Gladwin, you want me to take a stab at that one?
Sure.
Okay, there have been inspections done. First, there was an initial inspection done by a team from the Army Corps of Engineers, the Michigan State Dam Safety people, and FERC. You have to remember that any dam that has power has FERC oversight. If the power license is not granted anymore, it's state oversight. The entire length of by way of explanation, the entire length of the Tittabawassee River system from the north end of Gladwin County down through Sanford is being drained down to what the river was approximately before the dams were built. That's being done for apparently for additional inspection and or any repairs that may take place. And I also believe FERC may have ordered that, but I'm not certain on that. But that's where we're at with the water. So there's not going to be any water coming back up on that lake, at least this year, that's for sure. And quite frankly, nobody knows the answer as to when. There are so many different moving parts and so many agencies involved, and that's without even considering any potential litigation. It's going to be like that a minimum of 1, probably 2 years, and that's where it's at.
All right, thank you, Robert. We got several questions here from different people that don't have flood insurance, only homeowners insurance. Someone's here saying they got denied. People are asking what kind of financial assistance is available, if any, to those who do not have flood insurance. Does anybody want to address that particular topic?
Yeah, so I can start. Definitely if you were denied by your homeowner insurance and you feel like that was an error of some kind, I would definitely reach out to the Michigan Department of Insurance and Financial Services. They are collecting that information, and deciding what course of action to take, and they definitely have some advice that's available to you. So the first place I would start is like I said, the Department of Insurance and Financial Services. There might also be some voluntary organizations that are active in the area, but I think someone from Michigan would probably need to speak on that. Sarah, is that something you're able to speak on, or Jennifer?
Someone from Michigan available? You mean as far as financial assistance, or?
Someone who knows more about the voluntary organizations that are active right now. Yeah.
Yeah. There are numerous voluntary organizations in each of the counties that are working through the local VOADs, or voluntary organizations active in disasters. And so they are, some are national, some are local, most of them are local. And if you contact, as I mentioned in my presentation, if you have an unmet need, for example, and if you call 211, then you are assigned or linked up with some of those voluntary organizations. As far as other needs, each county, I believe, has resources that may be available for residents, and Jennifer or Bob could talk on some of those for community resources. But it depends on what the need is for the particular resident or survivor of the flood.
So I'll follow up with that. So right now we are still in limbo because we are waiting for a presidentially major disaster declaration to be declared, and we've asked for individual assistance as part of that declaration. And if we receive individual assistance, then that basically allows for some federal programs to open up for our residents. If that happens, what the process will be is everyone will be required to apply through SBA for a low interest rate loan, and that may be the assistance that you might be able to get. If you do not qualify for an SBA loan, basically you're not eligible, or you are unable to show that you can actually pay or fulfill the needs of the loan, then that does open you to other financial programs through FEMA. But the SBA is kind of the vetting process that they use for that. So beyond that, once those things are exhausted, there are other information out there. Today, actually, yesterday we posted some information on the Midland County social media page that talks about some funding that's made available to residents that have large impacts, and they're not loans. It's a local banking. There's some specialized funds that have been set aside. Honestly, I don't have it off the top of my head, but they are making funds, I think, up to $10,000 or so eligible for residents to help meet some of their needs. The long-term recovery group has also formed here in Midland. There's been a lot of donations made to the Midland Community Foundation and also through United Way. And right now, United Way is kind of addressing some rental needs and also well system needs at this time. But we're really waiting on that federal declaration because those resources need to be exhausted before we start looking at the donations from the community. And the donations that come into the community foundation are going to be handled through the long-term recovery group. And through that, we will have case managers that actually will work with residents to look at their needs and figure out what they actually need and help with their home and those types of things, and look at maybe the donations we received or rebuild supplies or volunteer groups, or maybe a combination of both to maybe try to help meet their needs. And our objective and mission is more about making a home maybe safe and livable, not necessarily providing finishing touches to a home. So we're working on identifying what that standard is as far as what's considered livable. And then we'll have caseworkers through the United Way and also through this long-term recovery group to actually work hand in hand with residents to identify their needs, to connect them to those resources in the community, and also those funds that are made available for maybe construction management and those other things to help homeowners. But right now in the process, we're really encouraging people, residents, to reach out to like 211 if they need muck out and stuff assistance. I know that Samaritan's Purse just left the area. I don't know of other VOADs and stuff that are still in the area. That's all been handled through United Way. So I would encourage you to reach out to United Way if you have those. As far as rebuilding, we have not started coordinating rebuilding yet because we are still waiting for that federal declaration and also to bring some of those tools and pieces into place with case management and as construction manager and having those experts on hand to help guide residents through that process. The main goal of the construction manager piece is to actually really assess the needs of the home that will make them safe, and also make sure if people are receiving quotes from a contractor that those quotes are legitimate quotes, that those quotes are realistic for the cost, and that homeowner isn't being taken advantage of. So if they do need assistance with meeting that, whether it's labor assistance or supply assistance, those types of things, through all these different pieces, maybe we can bring that together to help out that homeowner. So that's kind of where we are at this time and how we're trying to move forward. We're just still pulling some of those pieces together.
Hey,
Right.
and I'd like to jump in for 1 second just to clarify one point. And Jen did a great job of talking about the spectrum of assistance that's out there. Just for process purposes, if there is a major disaster declaration and if it includes individual assistance, FEMA will actually be the first stop for most people. We'll be managing that registration and intake process with our partners at SBA who are a part of that. But for most people that are eligible, they'll receive some kind of housing assistance, potentially including temporary rental assistance if they're eligible. Again, there's a lot of ifs there, but if they're eligible, that housing assistance, temporary housing assistance would come from FEMA first before SBA gets as a part of that conversation. But as Jen correctly clarified and explained, FEMA will provide some additional assistance, then the SBA will come in to offer some of that make it look pretty assistance. And if an individual is not eligible for SBA, then FEMA would come back in and we could work with them on replacing or repairing some of those essential items in their home that were not covered by their insurance or other forms of assistance. So only a very technical clarification that FEMA would actually be the first stop, not the SBA, but we are working closely with them. And again, this is all if there's a major disaster declaration and if it includes individual assistance.
Yeah, Dan. So we just to follow up that we had another person that asked, and it goes along with this same thing. If the emergency order is signed by the president, what can residents expect from FEMA if they don't have any flood insurance?
So, I don't want to get too far into the weeds about the types of programs that are available on our slide that will come out, disasterassistance.gov, that really provides a big picture about what's out there for individuals. We are going to work with individuals directly to determine their eligibility, and our assistance will be based on what their needs are. Again, FEMA assistance is not intended to make people whole. We're not an insurance program, but we may be able to provide limited assistance to individuals and households to make essential repairs to their primary residence. And again, we don't provide assistance for unimproved property, for outbuildings, for other structures like barns or fences. FEMA does not provide grant assistance for second homes or cottages or cabins. We're looking at where people live or lived more than half of the year immediately preceding the disaster. So there are a variety of programs that FEMA could be implementing depending on what is authorized in the major disaster declaration. Disasterassistance.gov has a lot of that information, but we will want people to register with us if there is a disaster declaration, and we'll work with those people individually on their specific case to determine what they may be eligible for.
I think it's also important to clarify that if you filled out any kind of a damage assessment survey with the county or city or anything, that information isn't automatically given to FEMA and stuff. There's going to be a totally different separation of an application process. That information was just collected by the local communities to provide a big picture to the state that these are our needs in our community, these are impacts in our community, and these are the things that we need help with. So if you've provided any information so far to the United Way or to emergency management or through whatever party, none of that goes to FEMA or SBA. That's a completely different application process. So make sure that when those programs are announced that you apply, do not assume that they've already got your name and number when we follow up with you. That's not correct. You need to apply through the new process.
All right.
And then don't forget that even if you have flood insurance and if you were paid out on a claim for that, if that major disaster declaration comes through, still register for disaster assistance, because there are things that disaster assistance will pay for that flood insurance won't. So it kind of works as like it all comes together and wraps around, you know, what flood insurance doesn't cover, IA might, individual assistance might. And what individual assistance doesn't cover, flood insurance might. So that they're intended to work together. So make sure that if you had flood insurance, if the disaster declaration happens, register for disaster assistance.
All right, thanks. Now we're coming up on our end time. We're at 7:30 right now. I'm gonna ask Jared, who's also looking at some of these questions, if he's seen anything that he wants to address that's come in. A lot of questions you've answered directly back to the people that have asked. We also have a question, and this is a good wrap-up one as well, and that's also probably for Jared or anybody else here on the line. Is there a place with consolidated information regarding updates, timing, wells, etc.?
Yeah, hey, Jim. So I mentioned Eagle's page on this. I guess maybe hear from MSP or one of the locals if there is something like that where there's sort of a clearinghouse where people can go and be sent out to the other direction, whatever direction they need to get information.
All right, State Police, do you guys have anything, Sarah, that a consolidated website or FEMA that you'd recommend people look at?
I do know that some of the counties have their own websites. I know if you're in Gladwin County, they have a very robust website with a lot of information consolidated and also appearing in more than one place on that page. I have to be honest, I haven't looked at all of the other county pages yet. I just saw that during the long-term recovery meeting today, so that's why it's fresh on my mind. There's disaster.gov for general information, and the MSP site will have some information, but that's more on the state level, and it may not have all of the local most up-to-date recent information. So I would suggest if you're in a particular area, whether you're in Saginaw County, Gladwin, Midland, etc., to go to your local county website or local county page or Facebook page to get definitely for more local type of information.
Yeah, Dan just reminded me of that disasterassistance.gov, disasterassistance.gov. So
people can also visit our website, FEMA.gov, for more information, but that localized information is really the state and county resources are really going to be the best source of information.
Right. Okay, well, like I said, we're at our wrap-up point here tonight. And I know there was a few questions we didn't get to that were a little bit beyond the scope of this webinar. I think Jared addressed some of those. We've got some other webinars we've hosted in the past on high water issues in Michigan and the Great Lakes region that I'll follow up with everybody after this webinar with an email with some links to some other resources that you might find interesting or helpful that you can refer to. I want to take a minute right now to thank our presenters tonight. We had quite a few. Teresa Seidel from Eagle, Brian Rudolph from Eagle, Bob Rank from MDOT, Sarah McRae from State Police, James Sink and Dan Shulman from FEMA, Robert North from Gladwin County, as well as other panelists, Dave Rothman from Fort Lakes Task Force and Jennifer Boyer from Midland County. Thank you all for presenting tonight, and I want to thank everybody that joined us tonight and stuck around. We still had well over 100 people that listened through all the Q&A. Like we mentioned, we'll be posting a recording of this online and letting you all know when and where that's available. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great rest of your evening.